The church was shaking. People were screaming, running, and falling over chairs. Mama See-It-All stood at the altar, her eyes glowing white, her voice breaking into a hiss that wasn't human. As the congregation watched in horror, her arm rippled, then cracked, scales pushing through the skin. Elizabeth raised her phone with trembling hands. "This is it," she whispered. "This is the evidence." But Mama turned slowly toward her, smiling. A smile that did not belong to any human being. "You think you can expose me?" the creature whispered. "Even your God cannot save you now." It was him, Chidi. Or maybe he was healed before and the sickness came back. You know these spiritual things. Chidi, sister, I'm not saying you're lying, but you need to be careful. You know what they say about doubting men of God. Elizabeth closed her eyes and counted to 5. Even her brother, educated and intelligent, had been so thoroughly indoctrinated that obvious fraud couldn't shake his faith. "Touch not my anointed," the shield that protected every charlatan in a cassock. "I have to go, Chidi." That night, Elizabeth opened her laptop and created a new folder titled Project Exposure. She began typing everything she could remember about the fake healing, every detail, every observation, every inconsistency. Her cousin Ngozi, a nurse who shared the apartment, stood in the doorway watching. "You're really going to do this?" Ngozi said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "You know how dangerous this is? Remember that journalist who tried to expose that other pastor? They nearly killed him. He had to leave the country." "I know. And you still want to do it? What choice do I have?" Elizabeth looked at her cousin. "Ngozi, you should see them. The way they believe. The way they give everything. There was a widow there today. I've seen her before. She comes every Sunday with her last money, buying seeds and oils, believing her breakthrough is coming. How can I just stand by?" "By protecting yourself," Ngozi said flatly. "Lizzie, these people, Mama See-It-All and her crew, they're not going to just let you expose them. They have too much to lose. That's why they need to be stopped." Ngozi was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she sighed. "Then at least be smart about it. Document everything. Keep backups. Don't tell anyone else. And Lizzie?" Her voice became deadly serious. "If at any point you feel unsafe, you stop. Immediately." Elizabeth nodded, though she wasn't sure it was a promise she could keep. She wrote until her eyes burned and her fingers ached. When she finally closed her laptop, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Purpose. But as she lay in bed, unable to sleep, listening to rain start again outside, she couldn't help but wonder, what would Mama See-It-All do when she found out? And how long before she did? Before she was Mama See-It-All, before she was Prophetess Patricia, she was simply Patience Adai's Nwosu, a girl from a God-fearing family in Nsukka, Enugu State. The Nwosu family lived in a modest compound where paved roads gave way to red dirt paths. Their house wasn't grand, just 4 cement block rooms painted fading yellow, but it was filled with love and the Word of God. Mr. Emmanuel Nwosu was a deacon at the local Anglican church, a civil servant whose devotion to God matched his devotion to his family. Every Sunday, without fail, the Nwosu family occupied the 3rd pew on the left side of St. Andrew's Anglican Church. Young Patience, the middle child and only daughter, grew up believing God was watching her every move, not in a frightening way, but like a loving father. Her mother, Grace, was a Sunday school teacher who could explain complex biblical concepts to the youngest children. "God is love," Grace would tell her daughter as they prepared dinner. "Remember that, Patience. Whatever you do in life, remember that God is love. Not fear, not punishment. Love." Patience believed her mother. The God she saw reflected in her parents' lives was indeed a God of love. When their neighbor's house burned down, the Nwosu family took them in without hesitation. When Mr. Nwosu's salary was delayed for 3 months, Grace never complained, simply tightened the belt and reminded her children that God had never failed them before. Patience absorbed these lessons like a sponge. By 8, she knew the Lord's Prayer and could recite large portions of Psalms from memory. By 10, she was helping her mother teach Sunday school. By 12, she was leading the children's choir, her clear voice bringing tears to the eyes of older church members. "That girl is going to do great things for God," the elders would murmur. Mark my words, she's anointed. Patience believed them. She would lie awake imagining herself as a great evangelist, traveling the country, bringing souls to Christ. She saw herself preaching to massive crowds, saw the sick being healed, saw the broken being restored, all through God working through her. When Patience was 15, something happened that seemed to confirm these beliefs. A visiting evangelist named Mother Esther came to preach. A woman with a reputation for prophetic accuracy that bordered on supernatural. On the third night of revival, Mother Esther stopped mid-sermon, her eyes landing on young Patience. "Young lady in the blue dress, come forward." Patience's heart hammered as she stood on shaking legs. Mother Esther placed a hand on her head. "God has shown me your future, my daughter. I see you standing before multitudes. I see people coming from far and wide to hear the word of God from your mouth. I see a ministry that will touch nations." The evangelist's voice became stern. "But hear me well. This gift comes with a warning. You must never allow pride to enter your heart. You must never seek glory for yourself. You must never compromise the word of God for popularity or riches. If you stay faithful, God will use you mightily. But if you turn aside, if you seek power from other sources, you will fall, and your fall will be great." Patience trembled. "I will serve God faithfully, I promise." Mother Esther smiled sadly, as if she could see something in the future she couldn't share. "We all make that promise, child. The question is whether we keep it." For the next few years, Patience devoted herself to her calling with single-minded determination. She finished secondary school at the top of her class. She was accepted to the University of Nigeria in Nsukka, where she studied religious studies. She started a campus fellowship that grew from 5 members to over 100. Her parents were proud. Her church was proud. Everyone expected great things from Patience Nwosu, but after university, reality hit like a slap. Patience moved to Lagos with dreams of starting a ministry. She rented a tiny room in Ajagunle and began building what she believed would become a great church. She called it New Dawn Ministries, a new dawn of true worship, genuine miracles, authentic Christianity. The irony would only become apparent years later. For the first Sunday service, she arranged 20 plastic chairs in a small rented hall. She printed flyers. She prayed and fasted. 3 people came: a confused elderly woman, a young man who left after 10 minutes when he realized there was no free food, and a street child who fell asleep during the sermon. Patience preached anyway, her voice echoing in the nearly empty hall. Next week would be better, she told herself. But next week wasn't better. The week after that, nobody came at all. This pattern continued for months. Patience tried everything: louder music, free counseling, community outreaches. Nothing worked. Meanwhile, other churches that had started around the same time were growing, filling with crowds, showing evidence of prosperity. "What am I doing wrong?" she would cry out to God in her tiny room. "I'm preaching your word faithfully. I'm not compromising. So why won't you bless me?" The silence from heaven was deafening. Patience began borrowing money, first from her parents, then from friends, finally from loan sharks. She fell behind on rent. She skipped meals. She wore the same 2 outfits week after week. Her health declined: weight loss, persistent cough, dull skin from malnutrition and stress. Still, she persisted, because quitting would mean admitting the prophecy had been wrong, that God hadn't really called her, that all those years of devotion had been for nothing. 2 years passed in this manner. 2 years of empty chairs and unanswered prayers. 2 years of watching other pastors drive past in nice cars while she walked because she couldn't afford bus fare. On a particularly difficult Thursday evening, 3 years into her ministry, Patience sat in her room counting the offering from Sunday. 350 naira. Not enough to buy a decent meal, much less pay rent or keep the ministry running. Her landlord had given her an ultimatum: pay 3 months' rent by the end of the week or be evicted. Her parents couldn't send more money. Her father's retirement meant they were barely surviving. Her friends had stopped taking her calls. The loan sharks were sending men with barely veiled threats. Patience looked at the 350 naira, then at the eviction notice, then at the bowl of Gary and groundnut that was her dinner for the 3rd night in a row. Something inside her broke. "God," she screamed at the ceiling, "what do you want from me? I've given you everything. And for what? For this? She gestured at her tiny room with its peeling walls. For failure? For poverty? For humiliation? She grabbed her Bible and threw it across the room. It hit the wall and fell to the floor, pages crumpling. That was the moment. That was when the first crack appeared in her foundation of faith. That was when a small voice whispered, "Maybe faithfulness isn't enough. Maybe God helps those who help themselves." That night, Patience made a decision. She would attend one more conference, a big one at a 5-star hotel in Victoria Island, where all the successful pastors would be gathering. She would spend money she didn't have because she had to understand their secret. She had no idea this conference would answer her questions in ways she could never have imagined. The conference was called Ministers' Summit, Breaking Through to Your Breakthrough. Registration cost 50,000 naira. Money Patience borrowed from another loan shark at a crushing interest rate. But she paid it because desperation makes people do desperate things. The Grand Paradise Hotel in Victoria Island was a gleaming tower of glass and marble. The lobby alone was larger than the entire compound where Patience lived, with floors so polished she could see her reflection and chandeliers that probably cost more than everything she owned. Pastors and prophets filled the lobby. Patience could immediately tell who was successful and who was struggling. The successful ones moved with confidence in expensive shoes and designer agbadas. The struggling ones lurked at the edges, trying to network their way into success. With a hungry, desperate look Patience recognized from her own mirror. The daytime sessions taught practical ministry skills, sermon structure, social media, financial management. Patience took copious notes, hoping somewhere in these teachings was the key she'd been missing. But it was the evening sessions that changed everything. On the second night, after main activities ended, Patience noticed something strange. A group of the most successful pastors, people whose ministries filled stadiums, quietly left the hotel lobby together. Curiosity overcame caution. Patience followed. They walked to a side wing, and one of them produced a key card, opening a door marked Conference Room 13B, Private Event. Patience caught the door just before it closed and slipped inside. The room was nothing like the bright modern conference spaces. This room was dim, lit only by candles. Heavy curtains covered windows. The air smelled of incense, not sweet church incense, but something darker, more pungent, almost nauseating. About 30 people were arranging themselves in a circle around a central altar, a low table covered with black cloth, upon which sat items that made Patience's skin crawl. A bowl of what looked like blood, candles of various colors, strange symbols drawn in ash or salt, and objects she couldn't identify but knew instinctively were not Christian. She should have left. Every cell in her body screamed to flee, but her feet remained rooted, hidden in shadows by the door. A distinguished man stepped forward. Pastor Benjamin Adeleke, known as Pastor Benji, founder of one of the largest churches in West Africa. His television program reached millions. World leaders sought his counsel. "Welcome, brothers and sisters," his voice smooth as silk. "Welcome to the Real Ministers' Summit. Welcome to where we discuss truths that cannot be spoken of in the light of day." Murmurs of agreement rippled around the circle. "Some of you are here for the first time, but we all share one thing. We understand that success in ministry requires more than just faith. It requires power, real power. And that power comes not from endless prayers, not from waiting on a God who may or may not answer, but from forming the right alliances." More murmurs, nervous laughter. Now, Pastor Benji's eyes scanned the room. "We have a new sister joining us tonight. Someone who has been struggling, someone who has been faithful, someone who has watched her ministry fail while others prosper. Sister, would you step forward?" Patience's blood turned to ice. "Sister Patience Nwosu, New Dawn Ministries. Come, don't be shy. We've been expecting you." Every eye turned to where she stood. How did he know her name? How did he know about her ministry? "Come," Pastor Benji's voice was gentle but commanding. Patience found herself walking forward as if in a dream. The faces watched her with expressions ranging from sympathy to amusement to something like hunger. "Tell us, Sister Patience," Pastor Benji said, "how long have you been struggling?" 3 years, she heard herself say. 3 years of faithfulness. And what has it gotten you? Nothing, Patience whispered. Speak up. Nothing, her voice cracked. Debt, poverty, failure, while pastors who preach manipulation succeed, I'm about to be evicted. Exactly, Pastor Benji nodded sympathetically. Because you're playing by rules that no longer apply, you think God is watching your faithfulness and will reward you. But let me tell you the truth. He leaned close. God is not in the business of making pastors wealthy. The real power, the real prosperity, comes from other sources. What sources? The sources that have always held power in this world. The ancient ones. The ones who ruled before Christianity came to Africa. The ones who never left, who simply learned to work through churches instead of against them. He gestured to the altar. Every successful ministry you see has made an arrangement. Somewhere along the way, they stopped relying solely on God and started accepting help from other patrons. You're talking about demons, Patience said flatly. Such crude terms, Pastor Benji chuckled. We prefer to think of it as diversifying our spiritual portfolio. Look around, Sister Patience. Do you see demons? No, you see successful ministers. You see people who have learned to thrive. He placed a cold hand on her shoulder. You have a choice tonight. You can leave, go back to your failing ministry, continue into poverty and obscurity. Or, he paused, you can join us. You can receive real power. You can finally fulfill that prophecy spoken over you. What's the cost? There's always a cost for power, always a sacrifice. The question is, are you willing to pay it? Patience looked around. She recognized so many faces. Pastors she had admired, ministers whose faith she had tried to emulate. They were all here, all part of this. What would I have to sacrifice? Pastor Benji's smile widened. Different people make different sacrifices. Some sacrifice their marriages, some sacrifice their children, and some, he looked directly at Patience, sacrifice their fertility. The words hit like a physical blow. You want me to give up having children? Not us, the powers. In exchange for bearing spiritual children, thousands of followers who will call you mother, who will revere you, who will give you their devotion and resources. One kind of fruitfulness for another. Since she was a little girl, Patience had dreamed of being a mother. She had imagined a house full of children, teaching them about God the way her mother had taught her. I can't, she whispered. Then you can't succeed, Pastor Benji said simply. You can walk away, no one will stop you. But if you do, you will return to your life of struggle and nothing will change. The room was silent. 30 pairs of eyes watched, waiting. Patience thought of her tiny room, the eviction notice, the 350 naira. She thought of the prophecy, of Mother Esther's words about touching nations. She thought of her parents' disappointment if she returned home a failure. She thought of all the people she could help if she just had the resources, the power, the influence. And she thought of something else, something dark she would never admit. How much she wanted to prove everyone wrong. How much she wanted those who had ignored her to see her thriving. Pride, that was what it was, the very thing Mother Esther had warned about. What do I have to do? Patience heard herself ask. Pastor Benji's smile was triumphant. Just a simple ceremony, tonight, right here. The ceremony was horrifyingly easy. They made her drink something from the bowl. It tasted like copper and ash. They made her stand in the center while they chanted in languages she didn't recognize. They made her repeat words she didn't understand but felt in her bones were binding, permanent. And then she felt it. A presence entering the room, multiple presences. They were cold and old and hungry. One approached her, circling like a predator, then with a sensation like ice water poured directly into her soul, it entered her. Patience screamed, not from pain, but from the wrongness of having something other take residence inside her body, behind her eyes, in the depths where only she should exist. The presence settled in like a parasite finding its host. She felt it examining her memories, her thoughts, her dreams. She felt it begin to change her, rewiring something essential about who she was. When it was over, Patience collapsed, gasping. She felt different, wrong, powerful. Pastor Benji helped her up.